Welcome to Linux Saloon, a place to discuss tech, open source, and where Linux is always on tap. Each show will have a talk about a Linux project, such as a Linux distribution, a desktop environment, or any variety of topics from the community. Anything that is Linux, tech, and open source related is on the table for discussion. I'm Nate, a Linux fitness and vintage tech enthusiast with an almost unhealthy obsession with the OpenSUSE project. And with me today, I got a heck of a panel of guests. I've got Eris, Jinda, Eric, Mark, Zeb, welcome Zeb, Rick, Alex, Ulfnick, and Adam Grubbs snuck in the door as the whole thing kind of kicked off. So welcome all. So glad to see you.
Good
Well,
evening,
thank you,
everyone.
Nate. How are you?
Be sure to do the straw poll. Eris has done such a fantastic job of doing these straw polls, putting them together and putting them out for the community. So there should be a link in the Zoom chat if you want to go ahead and knock out that poll sometime, in the soonish before we get to that. So on the docket for today, we'll be talking about that straw poll, doing our discussion on the distro exploration of Linux Mint, talk about what's going on next week, do our last call. But first, what have you been doing in Linux and tech? Eric, you said you have a whole bunch of stuff. What is this whole bunch of stuff?
I do.
Is it like
It's
is
amazing.
it like a Whole Foods bunch of stuff, like a whole Linux? Is that a new brand of Linux?
It's not, but you know what? That's probably coming soon. Someone's going to take that name now. We'll have
I hope
whole
so.
Linux, like in
Whole Foods Linux.
someone's been out there looking for that name, that right name. They just found it. So
Or
you're
something
welcome.
like a Trader Joe's kind of Linux or something like that too. You could have one of those. So Trader Zeb's Linux. I don't know.
Well, be that as it may, I'm not sure any of that will actually happen, but the whole bunch of stuff I was talking about is I am part of a podcast now. I'm doing Distrohoppers Digest, and I recorded my first episode last week, and that episode is out, episode 42. I took a look at something that I think a lot of people overlook, which is Fedora has spins, right? So Fedora has the main release, which is the workstation, and that's always been GNOME. And also, though, which it used to bother me, they're up a little higher on the web page now. There's a link, but it used to be all the way at the bottom of the page. There was a little box that said spins, and it was happened to find them one day, and I thought, well, that's interesting. There's all these versions of Fedora that are pre-configured with all these different desktops, and they have 8 different versions, 8 different spins now, which cover a whole gamut of all of the popular desktops: Budgie, Plasma, i3, XFCE, LXQT, on and on and on. And I decided I would take a look at Plasma. So I've been sort of stuck on GNOME for several years now. And prior to that, I loved Plasma and I used it all the time. Really, when I got the laptop that I have now, the Dell XPS, there was just something about the way that Plasma ran on that system. The fonts were really bad, and there was just something that just didn't work right. And I spent literally days and days and days trying to figure it out, to the point where it made me think I was crazy, because how could no one else have run into this? I tried so many different things, reinstalling all the different things. I just got to a point where I felt like I couldn't make it work, and so then I tried GNOME, and it just worked, and everything looked great. I didn't have any issues. The drivers worked properly. Everything just fell into place for me, and so. The complaints I had were that, and the complaints I still have about GNOME were, there's no system tray, there's no taskbar, there's no, little basic sort of desktop paradigms that I'm used to. So thankfully, there are extensions. I had those back, and I have a fully functioning desktop. And so I was perfectly happy doing that for quite a number of years. And in that same amount of time, I'd also stopped hopping. I really was just sort of stuck on Ubuntu, happily using it, really didn't need to do much else. So just was happy to sort of sit down, use my computer, and walk away when I was done. Didn't feel the need to toy around. So in joining Distrohoppers Digest, I had to actually sort of teach myself how to distro hop again.
Hmm.
And as silly as that sounds, like there are skills that go along with that, especially if you're doing things like dual booting, where you have to know partition management and grub and bootloaders and sort of mapping partitions between distros and all this sort of like little finer details of that practice that I had really kind of forgotten. And it was crazy to me because I'm sitting here trying to set up multiple distros because what I was really trying to do was figure out because they have a list of the distros that they've covered over the last so many years, and I was trying to not duplicate something that they've already looked at. And so I kind of came up with Fedora because it's something they looked at several releases ago and then never really looked at the spins. And so that was kind of my angle on it. But in getting to that point, I went through a bunch of different distros, and I ended up wiping my disk, which kind of blew my mind. Like, did I just do that? Like I did it. I'm like, no, there's no way I just was that dumb. So anyway, I've had a backup. I fixed it. It was okay. But it got me sort of back into like, okay, this is how I have to think of things and how these, how the dual booting is going to work, and planning it out. And so that was great. So that was sort of like the first thing, the bunch of stuff that I was talking about. The second one was using Plasma. Like I really felt like I was going to be forcing myself to use Plasma because I've just had it in my head that, GNOME is so much better for, at least for my use case. And something happened in about hour 6 or 7 of using it where everything just sort of fell into place again. And all of a sudden I'm using Dolphin, which is just the absolute best file manager bar none. I don't care what anyone says.
Yes.
The amount of power, it has everything built into it. I forgot the terminal was there, like, and I needed to do something, and I'm like, wait a minute, and I hit F4, boom, there it was. I'm like, oh, that's right. I remember now. I could actually work on this system and get things done in a very efficient way that GNOME just doesn't like. It just doesn't allow me to do. So after going through that and really just using it now, I'm really happy. I've spent the last several weeks sort of working in Plasma and really enjoying it and not having any of those issues I had before. Another one I always had was I use a lot of GTK software. And if you remember several years ago, before they did all of the refinement around GTK apps in Plasma, they didn't really look very good, especially when GTK switched to the, I don't remember what it's called, the client-side decorations. I think that's what it is.
Yep.
And those looked awful in Plasma. They barely worked. And so that's history at this point. And so that's fine. Like all the things that I had a problem with in the past just didn't exist anymore. And Plasma really has gotten to be just so good. And so that's the second thing, right? I just found and enjoy Plasma again. And the third thing was just was doing a podcast again. I haven't done a podcast in several years, and I really enjoy doing it. And I just sort of, you and I had done a podcast, and I really enjoyed spending that time with you personally, just spending that time together. But then the act of recording and sort of writing a script and doing the work behind it and all of that, like it was fun too. And I just didn't realize I had missed it. So yeah, that's all the whole bunch of stuff that I've been doing, and it's all been really, really good, fun, positive stuff. So,
well, that's fantastic. Well, one, I'm glad that you're doing that. I haven't listened to it's been a few minutes since I listened to Distrohoppers Digest. I almost said Distro Digest, but that's not it. So I'll have to make sure I hit this one. I have a bit of a commute now, so I have time to listen to podcasts, and I've actually strangely been really enjoying listening to podcasts. It's like just being able to like sit and listen.
In the car podcasts are magic.
Yeah, they really are. And it makes the drive really fast. Like, oh, I'm there.
Yes.
So I'll make sure I hit that up. Also, very cool. I'm glad you're having a good experience with Plasma. And that's something to take away from GNOME. I think GNOME has actually has gotten really good too. There's a lot of really great things that GNOME has been doing. Not to take away anything from GNOME whatsoever. I really believe in that. Rising tides raise all ships. And so as GNOME gets better, they introduce new ideas, new paradigms, and it gives the other desktops ideas and raises the tides there as well. So I think that the fact that you're having a good experience with Plasma is a positive thing, and I think that that's great. I mean, I've been having a great experience with Plasma. It hasn't changed much for me, but there's probably things that I just don't see that you probably see that.
Well, and it's not OpenSUSE, but it is an RPM based distro. So I mean,
Right.
I'm at least moving closer.
Well, I mean, the fact of the matter is that Fedora and OpenSUSE experiences are really pretty much the same. I mean, because they're pretty vanilla experiences. They don't put a whole lot into it. There's some slight things, they're very slight, but they're pretty much the same. I would actually say, now, don't tell anybody this. So just between you and me, Eric, since I'm sure no one else is paying attention, I will say I think DNF is probably right now my favorite package manager, even though I'm
Mhm.
an OpenSUSE zipper guy. I think that what they've been doing, what the team with DNF has been doing, has been great with the parallel downloads, the integration with
Yeah.
PackageKit. How it actually handles the conflicts, I think, is a little more automatic than Zipper. Nothing against Zipper. I think Zipper's more manual. It's like a stick shift versus an automatic. If you like stick shifts, then
Yeah.
Zipper's better. But I think that the automatic that DNF does is really great, and I think that there's some potential there for maybe some consolidation of efforts between the
Yeah.
groups. I'd like to see it. I mean, I don't
Yeah.
know what that means, but anyway. So yeah, I think that's great. I think it's awesome. I don't know. I'm really excited. Like everything you just said to me, just like raised my level of excitement, up to 11. So
Good.
yeah. So what does this mean then for your? I mean, obviously you thankfully you backed up your data and you didn't lose anything. But what does this mean like going forward now that you're learning to distro hop again? What is that doing to you?
Well, the nice thing about Distrohoppers Digest is that the cadence is once a month. So it's not like a frenetic, like, oh, well, you get, like speed dating or something. You get like 5 minutes with this person and to figure out if you like them or not. So no,
Mm-hmm.
this is you really get a good sense. So first of all, it allows me enough time to actually pick something,
Mm-hmm.
right? So instead of feeling like I have to make a decision because I don't have a lot of time, this time in the future as well, now I have sort of a list of ones that I'm interested in, but it gives me some time to think about, maybe I have a big project coming up and I can't risk using something that's a little too far out there to get work done, because that's really what I'm trying to do now. Is I don't want to just do it half-heartedly. One of the stipulations is the hopping has to be done on hardware. So it's only ever going to be like real deal install on probably my laptop, maybe my desktop, but almost certainly my laptop. And I have to think about that because I'm going to be doing work, and I have to make sure if something is important coming up, I have to be mindful of that. But I have the time now and sort of freedom and flexibility to pick something that sort of suits me and also that's interesting to me,
Mm-hmm.
that I want to try. I actually started out wanting to try Vanilla OS and got about 3 days into it and just figured out that, like, for what I'm doing right now and the state that it's in right now, it just wasn't going to work for me. And I don't. We the way the show's broken up, it's called Beautiful Failures is the section of the show, and I felt like it was a failure, but not on their part, on my part. Like I gave up, basically. I got that far in. I figured out a lot of things, and there's a lot of stuff about what they're doing that I really like, and I see where they're going. But for right now, it just didn't make sense for me, and so I considered it a failure on my part. But but that again, I had enough time to try that, and then decide, okay, this isn't really going to work. I'm going to try something else. So I appreciate that the cadence is such that I have that luxury, and so for this month coming up, I think because I want to stick with KDE, I'm really interested in Kubuntu. I used to be like, Kubuntu was my distro.
Mm-hmm.
It was all I used for years. And I just sort of fell away from it when I fell away from KDE Plasma. And so now I feel like I need to sort of see if I can go home and enjoy it. So I did install it the other day. I'm sort of playing around with it. And so far, it's working great, and we'll see if that sticks. But yeah, that's what's fun is now I'm sort of using it as a way to sort of get back into trying new things because I really haven't distro hopped in years. Um, it's one of the reasons I haven't made new videos on my channel for a long time on YouTube because I really haven't had anything to talk about. It's like, well, I'm booting into the same instance of the same distro with the same,
Mm-hmm.
there's really nothing. All of my material was, I tried this thing and it didn't work, and here's how I made it work. That was most of my content. So hopefully going through this will get me back there to where I feel inspired to do that. So anyway.
Yeah, that's great. This is just, tangentially related. Would you say that by not distro hopping, there's a feeling of stagnation in technology or technological enthusiasm, technology enthusiasm, I should say?
No, actually, I think it's the opposite. I think when
Okay.
all you do is hop and you only see tiny incremental changes, it really starts to feel so samey.
Uh,
Like, ooh, whoop-de-doo, like they have one set of icons different or one little, but if you don't do it for a few years and then you come back to it, things are different. Installers are different. File systems are different. Everybody's using BTRFS now, or so, like there are different things happening that just didn't exist a few years ago. And that's cool. Like that,
yeah.
you can see the progress being made, the change, and not just making changes because, oh, we're just going to try things like real legitimate, like quality of life things like Butterfest snapshots are awesome. Like they really make life easy.
Mhm.
And it's great to see so many distros have sort of centered on that and said, this is, this works for the end user and therefore we're going to do it.
The Butterfest snapshot is a nice in between the immutable OS paradigm and then the
Mm.
traditional
Hmm.
paradigm. It's kind of it crosses both worlds a little bit, not exactly, but
Yeah.
it's very close. You don't have the lockdown
It's
of the
the,
immutable, but you don't have the if I screw something up, I'm hosed with the other side. So it's kind of
it's
interesting.
the, it's the hybrid automobile of Linux.
Yeah, exactly. There we go. It's a yeah, petroleum electric hybrid. Yeah, I like it. I'm not sure which one's less fuel efficient.
I want
Yeah.
biofuel and steam hybrid.
You know
Oh,
what?
do you? Yeah.
I don't know.
Okay.
I like that idea actually.
Yeah.
We have a firebox
Yeah.
like in your firewall instead that you have to keep putting a hardwood into or
That-
coal. That'd be great.
That's what the kids are for.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, thank you very much. I super appreciate you sharing that. I'm really excited to see how this goes. I'm always excited about hearing updates too, because I'm in things as things
Mhm.
progress and so forth. So, what is the next distribution you're going to hop onto to kick the tires on or whatever?
Yeah, I was mentioning Kubuntu is probably going to be the one
Okay.
as of right now, just because it's what I had used for such a long time, and because it was to me the perfect Plasma distro because it was based on Ubuntu and it's not rolling, but they do backports, and so you can always get new versions of Plasma and like the latest versions of the desktop environment, which is really what I always wanted. Like I was never worried about not having the latest version of Audacity.
Mhm.
Like I can live with that being 6 months out of date. It was always, oh man, they just released the point release and there's a new version of whatever desktop environment. And like,
Right. Well,
and that was always my disappointment. So, but they normally, well, they have backports,
mhm.
which, you know, they just release the newest version of the desktop environment. I used it that way for years and never had one problem. So I feel confident going back to that and just seeing like, I think it'll be funny if I actually end up back on Kubuntu and really happy with it.
Yeah. So if you
So,
do, Sean Gold says he's been running Kubuntu as his daily driver currently. I think he said for about 2 months. So if you have any questions, I'm sure Sean, you can beat up on him. But I don't know how to contact him outside of YouTube. So
okay.
maybe there's an email out there somewhere. But anyway, I just want to throw that out there.
Okay, cool.
Well, great. Well, thanks so much. It's a great update. I like it. Now, if you haven't had a chance yet, knock out that straw poll. And while you're knocking out that straw poll, I want to welcome a few more people who came in. So we have Steve's very own, kind of like, or I should say Steve, Chicago's very own Steve. Maybe I should say like that, right? Would that be more appropriate?
There you go.
Yeah. And then
Howdy.
Vince is here. You got Swift and Penguin. Welcome to the Linux Saloon. It's nice.
Thank you.
Always wonderful
Good
to see faces.
evening.
Yeah, I almost didn't make it because I broke my computer yesterday. I had a
Oh,
whole
my goodness.
adventure yesterday.
That's fantastic.
Yeah.
well-
I can share it if you want real quick, but
Well, we're gonna go do the straw poll, so maybe we
Yeah.
can get to that a little bit later.
yeah.
But
Yeah.
yeah, computers do break, especially when you buy cheap ones and not business grade. Anyway, so Eris,
Nothing to do with that.
Eris, that's you did a straw poll again, and I appreciate so much all the work and time you put into those straw polls, and so I guess take it away.
So the poll was how has your experience with Linux been? 40% said it's amazing, 30% said it is good, 10% said they didn't have enough time, busy with work, busy with life, 5% said it's okay, 5% did not have a good time with it, 5% not interested in exploration, 5% Tux Penguin. Tux Penguin votes are always in there. And I did get a couple responses. First response, hashtag Linux Mint. I installed Linux Mint Cinnamon Monday night, and it's like the last time. It's pretty good. This morning I installed the XFCE version on Vert Manager. It works well, but since Vera was released late in December, and XFCE 418 was released in the 1st of December, the 418 didn't get included. My guess, in parentheses. So far, so good. And Cinnamon seems to have a problem with adding key bindings. I removed the super key from the grouped applets, and after adding a few workspaces, I then added a key binding to move window to another workspace. This works, but it's hit or miss. It's the same way on Debian Bookworm. Linux Mint defaults to FlatHub when installing Telegram Desktop. LibreOffice packages 7.7 versus Flatpak version 7.5. GIMP packages 2.10.30 versus FlatHubs, which is 2.10.34. Inkscape package is 1.1.2 and Flatpak is 1.2. Thunderbird package and Flatpak versions are basically the same. The Firefox version package installed is 1.12.0.2. It's the same number as the Flatpak, but the Linux Mint does not add Linux Mint and Vera branding? Question mark. Most everything else that I've installed is more to do with my workflow or relax flow. I give it 4 out of 5 penguins. And then I got another reply. It says, I logged into my VPN and changed the location to Chicago. Guess how many times I voted? And they posted the gifts, and the gift said 0.
There's always one.
Funny.
That's good. I appreciate that someone took the time to write in and talk about their experience. If they're not going to be on the show, I encourage that. If anyone's listening and doesn't feel like participating on camera or with voice, if you have something to say, especially on the straw polls, like write in. You know, that's great. It's good stuff.
Yep, I like any kind of feedback any way we can get it. I think that's great. That's why I like those straw polls too. It's pretty nice. So I wonder if there was anything in particular. Maybe I missed it as you were talking, but why only 4 out of 5 stars? Like what would have made it 5? I guess is kind of the part I'm missing.
Their key bindings weren't working very
Oh,
well.
okay. Oh, that's right.
Yeah. Which is interesting because I generally remap those as well, specifically exactly what he's talking about with moving windows between desktops. So it is, I mean, there's could be any number of reasons why that might be, but yeah, that's something I haven't run into, but that's the thing with computers, right? Just because I don't have a problem doesn't mean someone else won't. And I know that Cinnamon definitely seems to sometimes have some very like odd issues. Not to single it out, but it's something I've experienced using Cinnamon. I was very much into Cinnamon. Actually, sort of, I had a in between period there with Plasma and GNOME with Cinnamon, but yeah, that's a shame. I mean, I guess if he wants to try to find some help with that, I mean, 4 out of 5 is not bad.
No, it's pretty good.
You know, yeah.
That is something I noticed in the Telegram, that people were having very, very slow updates with Linux Mint.
That's a mirror issue.
And,
so I think
yeah.
I think if you don't I mean you can adjust your mirror to fix that, but I think if one mirror's too slow, then shift mirrors.
Yeah. I suggested that, and they said that they were bouncing between 5 or 6 mirrors, and it still didn't fix it.
Hmm.
So.
Oh, okay. Well,
Which
one
is
of the first things that the setup assistant offers for you to do is updates. And when you first load that update manager, the bar at the top says choose local mirrors. And I don't know that a lot of people either understand what that means or actually follow through and do it. Because I know for myself personally, the Mint mirror is usually in the UK by default, which I mean, I know that's where it's distributed from, and that makes sense. But obviously, for me, it's not a mirror that's going to work well for me. So I always change that.
Yeah, me
so
too.
I wonder if they, I mean, if they're saying they're bouncing between mirrors, my guess is that they did change it. So
Yeah.
So the installation process, did anybody have any trouble with the installation process? Yeah, I imagine not.
No.
That was such a simple
No.
installer, and it made me really think how simple that was. Like I think even my grandmother could do it, even though she's dead. I think she could even do the Linux Mint installer.
Jeez.
And I was that too. I mean, it's been more than 20 years. I think it's okay,
I
right?
mean, hey, if she could pull it off, that would be quite a vote of ease of use there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Anyway,
So, but I literally thought it was just so simple. Like, so in my mind, I'm thinking, and I go through this periodically, but I don't necessarily want to like be like really evangelize Linux like I used to, just because if someone has a bad experience and they come back at you and like, Linux is terrible. But what I thought was interesting about that is like when people do ask me for like what they should use in Linux, I've kind of been hesitant in saying, well, you can try this or that or this. And I think something has changed the last time I tried Mint, and this installation process was just so simple and basic, and it just works so well that I think, just on the installation piece of it, I'm very comfortable with the idea of just giving somebody a thumb drive and say, here you go.
Just don't do it if you have an IC dock. I don't know, for some reason it wouldn't pick up my blank drive on my IC dock.
Oh, really?
I actually had to I'll turn off all my other drives when I'm installing something so the grub doesn't steal them. And I actually had to turn all my drives on for me to be able to select the open SSD to install it. And then it stole all of the grub from all my other installations.
Yeah, I think Pepe says it in the chat. He says the installer Mint is exemplary as good UI and UX in my humble opinion, and I think so. Now, I mean, for like more like unique installation situations, it probably doesn't fit. But I think that's not the market anyway for Linux Mint. Like that's not who they're not going for that weird techie that's got goofy things like an IC dock that has 8 different drives, like some people here on this panel.
Well, it's not so much that. It's like there's most other distros I have no problem with. So I was going to try Zorin 16 and Mint, same issue with Zorin. But every other, like when I was doing Vanilla and Navarro and some of these others, it picked up my open drive that I can install it on.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
It's
Did you
an
report?
Ubuntu installer issue
Oh.
probably, because maybe the other ones you were using Calamares, and that shouldn't be.
I mean, maybe a version. I don't think all of them had Calamares.
Okay.
Did you report that to Linux Mint? They might be able to fix that. You might want to report that as a bug.
I don't think it's a bug. It'll show it if I go into something else, but it won't let me select that particular drive to install. It'll see my finally when I turned all the drives on, it saw you have multiple OSs. Do you want to install side by? Well, I got 4 different drives in there. No, I don't. So I went to something else, and then I was able then to select the blank drive to install it on.
Yeah, if I can just jump in here,
Absolutely.
here quickly, as someone who hasn't been using Linux for quite a while now, in the last, I guess, 3 or 4 months, I've been dabbling again,
Mm-hmm.
and the one thing that was why I jumped on this particular Linux Mint bandwagon was because everywhere that I've been reading, everyone has always said that Linux Mint is the way to go. Linux Mint is the way for Windows users to be able to get a foot into the Linux world. Now that may well be true if you're using a laptop with AMD or Intel graphics. But the minute you introduce Nvidia into the mix, the minute you introduce different hardware into the mix, I found the actual Linux Mint install a real pain in the neck, because I've just recently bought a new 4050 graphics card. Now, Nouveau hasn't got a clue what that is. So I was presented with a 1024 by 768 install screen on a
Nice.
48-inch widescreen. Now,
Was it like this big in the middle of the screen?
It was like Fisher Price text. So I worked my way around it, and I got there, and then I rebooted, and everything came back up to the screen, but I was still in 1024. So I jumped onto the tool section, and I found the Mint driver installer, and I ran it, and it said, no, you've got everything you need, it's working. And I'm like, okay, so let's now jump onto the terminal, and let's do a sudo ubuntu -drivers auto install. Nope, that one told me that I had all the drivers again. And I then had to go into Synaptic, pick the Nvidia driver 525, because that was, I think, was the highest that I could find, then check that it picked up all of the other things, the DKMSs and all the other bits and pieces that it needs, the Nvidia settings, ran all of that, rebooted, and bingo, I'm now back to my setup that I know I can use and see. However, Linux Mint isn't the only distro to do this. And my next gripe was, and I know I've got a unique setup here, but I've got a 5120 by 1440 monitor. So it's a 32:9 aspect ratio. So it's the native resolution of this monitor. So why is everybody giving me 3840 by 1440? Yeah, and they don't always auto pick the fact that it's 120 hertz. I have to manually change it. So, as I said right at the beginning, anybody coming from a non-video experience, it's a breeze, because I've got an old laptop that's got an Intel graphics card in there. I know I can whack Linux Mint on there, and within 10 minutes I'm up and running. But if you've got Nvidia, and this has just been going on for donkey's years. It was the same back in 2014. It was the same when I left in 2020. And it's a shame to find it's the same now. However, there is one huge bonus that I do want to mention, even though it's not Linux Cinnamon. Wow, has Wayland come on hugely. I recently tried Nabarro Linux. And Glorious Eggroll, who created this, has done a fantastic job. You install it, it says, do you want all of these codecs? Yes, please. Do you want Nvidia drivers? Yes, please. Bingo. And I didn't realize that I was running Wayland with Nvidia.
Really?
I installed my game, which is World of Warships, which is on Steam, and it ran perfectly. And I never ever thought I would save the day. Well done, Wayland. You've done a fantastic job.
That's really great
news.
news.
Nvidia hates Linux and Linux hates Nvidia, and that'll always be the case.
Well, I didn't have that issue with Nvidia. It was a click one, go into the install the drivers, one click install. I don't have that high falutin card you do. I got a 1660, so I don't have that high falutin card.
10, what's that? 7 years old now? 6 years old?
Yeah.
So Nouveau.
For me, 6 months, but
but you know what I mean. Yeah. It's my old 2080 would install straight away.
Yeah.
I know somebody who I talked them through, and their 30 series installed straight away. But because the Nvidia 4070 has only been out, 6 months now? Not even that, maybe. Nouveau has not caught up, so it doesn't recognize it at all.
So I think your issue is the fact that Linux Mint is based off the LTS version of Ubuntu, because Ubuntu LTS will do the same thing, because they're using older Nvidia older Nvidia drivers, older Nouveau versions with the LTS and its installer. So it's probably because LTS hasn't caught up. And I'm pretty sure Nouveau has not caught up to that 40 series graphics card either.
I
But
guarantee it hasn't,
yeah.
because MX Linux accelerated hardware support, Beta 3, does exactly the same thing. It's
Yeah.
Nouveau that doesn't know about it.
So this
Mhm.
this is something that I remember hearing you talk about years, like you said, donkey's age. It has been a consistent problem for Linux forever that new hardware, because the people developing a lot of this stuff, and this isn't a knock or meant to be like, a negative thing. There aren't a lot of people with these systems, right? There aren't a lot of people with that monitor, with that resolution. There aren't a lot of people with 4000 series cards. And so for people like that, even though gaming has come so far with, all of the advances we've had, there are still hardware-based problems. And that's just a fact of life that a lot of people, I don't have cutting edge hardware. So like Zeb says, my stuff's 5 years old. I plug it in and there you go. It just works. But that's not the same experience that a lot of people have with that new hardware that they just paid a lot of money for. And someone says, you should try Linux. It's really cool. And there's a way for you to run all of your Windows games and, just install Steam or Proton and they try it and they have exactly the same experience that Zeb just had with 1024 by 768 in the middle of in the middle of this monitor. And that's a terrible first impression for someone like that. And I don't know how we fix it,
So
Well, I understand they don't have it though if they use the latest AMD graphics cards, because AMD work hand in hand with Linux and make sure that it goes into the kernel as quickly as possible. It's just this age-old Nvidia hates Linux and Linux hates Nvidia. And you're right, the newest and greatest hardware will always cause any distribution a problem. But surprisingly, it doesn't with Nabara. Nabara just installed it straight away. Next.
So I think
people have the technology to do it.
Well, I think though, like in fairness to Mint, I don't think that their target like user demographic is the I'm on the leading edge or cutting edge of technology. I think it's a little bit more slower moving. To be fair to
but they say
Mint.
that they are
how many
the
people have
perfect
recommended it?
Well, I know.
It's the perfect example to come from Windows.
Right. What I'm saying though is I think if you're going to dip your toes in Linux, you're going to try it out, do something. You're probably not going to put it on your primary main machine. You're probably going to do it on your slightly older machine, unless if you're someone like Leo who puts it on his latest machine. Your chances are it's not going to be the latest and greatest. It's not someone who wants that brand new experience. Chances are. And I think that it's probably harder because they're using it like an LTS Ubuntu, and I think it's a little bit of a harder reach for that newer.
I guess I'm just a masochist and always have been where that's concerned.
That's
Go
true.
straight on my main machine.
But
the same thing has been true though, honestly, Nate. And I don't disagree with you. I think people play to their strengths, and that is I think that they probably don't hear this kind of feedback from someone like Zeb often enough to consider it. But they also had been failing poorly, miserably, in my opinion. I got that laptop, and it was a Dell, which is that hardware, and it wasn't brand new. It was already probably over a year, close to 2 years old. The model I got it new, but it had been out, if that makes sense. And so, it always blew my mind that I would install a distro on a laptop, and none of the things that needed to be there for it to work properly on a laptop were there. None of the power saving things, none of the hybrid graphic things, none of the very standard technologies that laptops that you deal with on a laptop. It's as if no one in the distro ever used a laptop. And I'm thinking, everyone uses laptops. Mm-hmm. Most people use laptops. I mean, it's actually weirder now for people to use a desktop than a laptop. How is it that all of these different distros are so bad at this? And it used to just, I mean, I feel like they've gotten a little better. I really do. I feel like some of the power saving stuff is there. I feel like hybrid graphics have been sort of, for the most part, at least for the older stuff, or the more mainstream stuff, that's been much easier to deal with. But yeah, there was a period of time where I echo exactly what sort of Zeb was saying, but only with the laptop use case instead of cutting edge hardware.
But I'm going to flip it now and go the opposite way, Eric, because the reason why a lot of those laptops don't work is how many thousands of different types of laptops out there are there? How many thousands of different types of audio chips?
Yeah.
And the chips in various situations, and different combinations of chips, and it's impossible for an organization that primarily runs on volunteer basis, unless you're going to start talking about the really big boys, but all of these distros are run by people who are passionate about the distro, and they've got their laptop and it works for them. And they can't possibly think about the other 2,000 variations of laptop that are out there. So in that regard, I can understand why some of that happens. So that's a flip side of me moaning about Nvidia, like I've always done.
Zeb, was that code for I should get a ThinkPad?
Well, okay, but which one of the 42 different types of
Right,
ThinkPads
well,
do you get?
Good
You know
point.
what I mean?
Good point. Good point.
Good point. Yeah.
I think with Linux anyway, I think if you go for like not necessarily the brand new like gaming machine or even like the brand new like consumer grade machine, but if you go for a business grade machine like a Latitude, or I don't know what, although I have a Lenovo now, but that's it. It's not running Linux. Or like the EliteBook, those typically have slightly more, I don't say like, for lack of a better term, like a burned in hardware that has the driver support already pushed up into the kernel and everything else. So you're going to have probably a better experience on those than you're going to have like on brand new, lesser tested, lesser whatever hardware. Because unless the good people at whatever hardware manufacturer decides to push it into the Linux kernel, like they actually do that work. Intel does a good job, and AMD does a pretty good job too. But unless they've done that work, you're not going to have that good experience. But by the time, the Latitude gets that generation of CPU and chipset that accompanies it, it's already had some time to kind of work out a lot of the issues.
Well, also the Dell machines, and I noticed this actually today while I was going to the Ubuntu site. Dell certifies Ubuntu and a couple other distributions to work on all their machines. It's literally it's literally right on their website. It says certified by Dell right on their website. I found it somewhere while I was going through something.
And that's actually a good point. It reminded me of something. I'm going to pitch this just because there's a new Linux podcast, and it always makes me happy to know that there's a new Linux podcast. It's called Linux Matters. It has Alan Pope, Mark Johnson, and Martin Wimpress, which, good crowd there. And Wimpy was actually talking about he had a very specific list of criteria, and it was a lot to do with the hardware and all of that. But one of them was that the company had to certify that Linux ran on that piece of equipment. And it turned out that Lenovo was the company that was able to give him all of the things he needed. So Nate, when you mentioned Lenovo, I thought, oh, well, that's actually, because they do the same thing that Penguin just mentioned. They certify, I think, Ubuntu and maybe Fedora.
Yes,
something like that.
Lenovo is one of those other companies.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Anyway, the podcast Linux Matters, if you haven't, I'm pitching it for them.
That was great. Yeah. So it's going to be on the same feed as the Ubuntu podcast. So if you subscribed and like me, you didn't remove it because you still wanted to see or go back and listen to old episodes, no need to change anything. It's the same feed. They might have another feed too. I don't know.
They do. But they have a new one as well.
Okay.
Yeah.
But I was really happy to see that they use the Ubuntu podcast feed as well. So that
they made this whole thing where they're like, it's definitely not the Ubuntu podcast. Wink, wink.
It was so good. I mean, different music. I kind of missed the old timey thing, but
yeah.
But the new like synth is actually pretty good too. So,
Mhm.
you know, things move on. But yeah, that was a great discussion they had, and I was I really enjoyed
Well, you were
following that journey.
you were right there though, looking for laptops at. I mean, I don't know if you'd already made your decision or not, or if you had a decision.
I did.
wasn't sure.
I did, yeah.
Okay. So,
Yeah, I like when Martin goes shopping for me.
Yeah, it's actually it's nice.
Yeah.
So I was going to also add for the setup process. Something I thought was interesting is it was super straightforward. I said that, but this is the first time I've actually ever had it default to Chicago instead of New York, and so I immediately blamed Steve for somehow interfering with my Linux Mint install and putting me in the wrong time zone initially. So Steve, I don't know what you did. I don't know if you hacked my computer. It was totally air gapped, so obviously you have some sort of superpowers that I don't know about. But anyway, so I thought that was interesting. And also, Joe, I want to welcome you to the stream. It's nice to see your face again.
it is.
Oh, and I can't hear you.
Oh, there he is.
Nice to hear his mic.
Yeah, well, it's nice to see your
Oh,
face. Did I hear you?
No, that was Steve.
No.
He's being ginned.
So it's
Sorry guys, I started that trend.
Yeah, well, at least you came back. I
Yeah,
still feel
yeah.
responsible. I still feel responsible for your mic issues.
I think I figured some things out.
Okay, well, that's good.
I wish I couldn't hear Steve.
Cover your ears,
Yeah,
everybody.
And Eris, thanks for that. The Ubuntu podcast theme, that link. We'll make sure I put it in the show notes too. So I don't know if you can put that in the show notes so I can make sure I link it. Yeah, the theme, the default theme of Linux Mint, I think is basically perfect. And the fact that you can right out of the gate, you can change it to if you want a dark theme or whatever, and what highlight. I really appreciate that. It's there we go. It's such a simple thing. It's a little thing. It's a little user experience thing, but and nothing to slam on Plasma like traditionally how you had to change everything, all the different little knobs and levers and everything else to change. Sometimes just a simple I want a green with dark color is all I need, and I'm happy enough. You might want to tweak it, which I don't know if you can in Mint. I didn't go down that road, but in Plasma you could actually tweak it further if need be. But anyway, I really appreciate that also about it.
Yeah,
So-
it's nice to see them put some effort into the the visual appeal of the distro. I think again that making that first impression, beyond the hardware thing that we discussed. I mean, Mint makes a very nice first impression on almost everyone who uses it. Even that live boot, right? You get that first welcoming view, and yeah, having. And it's not like a major overhaul. It's still Cinnamon. It's still very familiar, but the Mint Y theme, those are sort of undergoing some tweaks. This release, I think they made the folders like a lighter color and got a lot of feedback from that. I think they're making further changes for the next release, but I think one of the accusations I hear about Cinnamon is that there's no movement. It's just sort of stuck. Like you don't really see a lot of changes, which I think is unfair because you actually do see a lot of changes. I remember it's probably about a year ago. One of the things I loved on a laptop is the ability to, if I plug in a mouse, turn off the touchpad. And I remember they added that to the control panel under touchpad, and it was I was like, it's like they read my mind. And check that, boom, I'm done. So they do make changes and advancements in Cinnamon, but I think not in a very visible way sometimes. And that's what's kind of neat about this is it is getting some visual attention that is visible, and I think kind of gives people the confidence that Mint does actually put a lot of effort into Cinnamon.
I think the fact that they don't change a lot of things is that actually works in the favor of Cinnamon. It's a little bit more of a it's a stable, I guess you could say. It's very, very, very. The user experience is not going to dramatically shift from one release to another. There aren't surprises. Obviously, I think they've definitely done some tweaking. I think they've really done a lot to, enhance the experience. Things like adding hot corners. I think that their workspaces interface is nice as well. So they've done a lot of things like that. I think that are really nice. And also, if you just go into the system settings, everything is very clearly laid out. there's not a lot of system settings. You're not overloaded with them. This is not a knock on Plasma. I think Plasma is great in the system settings, but the fact that it's all it's very, very simple, very easy to digest. And so it's a great way to just kind of begin your process in learning a desktop interface that's different. Eris.
So how does everybody feel about that the new section that they put up with the colors for the desktop that changes the ribbon on the folders? Did everybody like the new ribbon?
I love that.
The new theme colors?
Yes, I absolutely love that.
It changes the color of the ribbon, but the folder stays the same color always.
So that's one of the things, Eris, that they're actually changing. For at least what I read was that they got feedback that wasn't. I guess two things. First, they have the old classic Mint Y folder icons available, so you can actually use those if you don't like the new ones. Which I'm sure there are people that are just so used to seeing the ones that are there now that the new ones are very jarring. I know when I first booted the live session, it was like, well, that's different. So, so they have the old ones available, and then I think the feedback they've taken from that is that people don't love that it's just that little stripe, and I think that they're actually, if you can think of Yaru, like how Yaru the top of the folder is sort of visible behind the tab and all of that, and how that's sort of colored in. I think they're doing something more like that, where there'll be more of that accent color as part of the icon, something like that. So I haven't seen any renderings of it or anything.
So
if you go into themes, the theme section, theme apps.
Yep.
You have all these options where like you click on icons, and you got like all different color for the folders, and also the stripe or ribbon on the side, and you also have Yaru. So I don't know if people knew that. I just want to point that out.
I went with Mint X with the green. So I guess I was missing a little bit what you were saying about the stripe and whatnot, as opposed to changing the whole color, I guess. But
there's.
You know.
I'll tell you what I noticed on that particular thing, because that's the first thing that you're hit with on the welcome screen is what desktop color do you want to be. So I clicked blue, clicked on the menu, went to flick through the menu items and went, well, that's grey. Well, that's rubbish. That didn't work. But it's not talking about that. But for me, that's part of the desktop. You click on the start menu, and I expected to see those blue highlights. And I've only just now opened up the file manager, and you've got this big blue stripe going across the whole thing to show. But for me, Linux Mint Cinnamon has always had fantastic looks, and it's easy on the eye, and you could always change it relatively simply. So I haven't noticed all those changes that you guys have, because I guess that sort of stuff, I don't look for that anymore. I want it to install, I want it to work, I want Steam to work, and I want my ships game to play. And if it doesn't, then it gets the old-fashioned next, and I move on to the next one until I find that it does work. But other than that thing I had with Nvidia, I think Linux Mint is a really good distribution, and it just works.
The new 2110's got some really nice features. If you want to use the spices, there's a cinnamon, I can't remember exactly what it's called because I have it on a couple of other machines. But it's got a menu that I really like because you can lay it out. I'm a plasma guy, so I like the tiling type thing or whatever. And this menu gives you a little bit more versatility than the standard stock menu on there. I had been on Manjaro for almost 3 years until it did a major crash on me, and then I got frustrated. And it's funny, you guys, when I came in here, you talk about NVIDIA. I'd been on NVIDIA for a long time. I built my last machines, I think, in 2019 with 1660 Supers. I am on an all AMD system now, 5800X with a 6700 XT. And the reason I did this too was I started having, like you said, with the newer hardware, where no matter, unless it was an Arch-based system, no matter what I did with Ubuntu, I was getting screen tearing and some really, no matter going in and doing all the pipeline changes and all the tweaking that you have to do, I still couldn't get this to work. And the irony of it is, as of today, just a few hours ago, I went back. I was on Garuda for a while, and it was having buggy stuff. So I actually am right now am on, of all things, Ubuntu Studio 2304. And there's a couple quirks here and there, but I love Plasma, and so far it's okay. But it just seems like no matter what distro you look at, I think Manjaro was the longest I was ever on. I was on Mint a long time ago for 2 years. I think when Zeb, back before we kind of all took a hiatus, and Mint has always been solid, and then they got more polished a few versions ago. And this last one of the things I noticed about 2110 is how snappy it is. It's very snappy. It's very quick. It's very light on resources. My wife has been on, she's a full-time realtor, as I've mentioned before. She's been on Mint for, I think she's starting her 4th year now on it. And I've got it on both her machines. Yeah. And she could run anything she needs for work on there because it's pretty much all cloud-based and, web-based and stuff. And she likes it. I mean, the biggest muscle memory issue she's had problems with, which you guys are all going to laugh, is 20 plus years doing real estate, whatever, being on a computer, and she still can't transfer files or photos from one folder to another, or know how to download a zip file and just boom, extract it into its own folder. And the muscle memory she had with Windows, the way she used to create a folder, download it, and then drag the photos out of that. So I have been trying to show her with this, and that is probably the biggest quirk. Even all this time she's been on it, she still fights with it a little bit, but I think she's now starting to just get to it. But I think getting rid of the muscle memory coming from Windows is probably the biggest problem.
You know what, though? That's quite a success story, Joe. I mean, 4 years.
Yeah. I put her on the laptop. I put it on her laptop, and I left Windows on her main machine in case something went wrong or she needed a program that was Windows based for real estate or whatever. And I let her run on that for probably over a year. And when I first put it on, I said, so how do you like the new operating system? She goes, it's not Windows. I said, no. Even though it looked different, there were two different machines. So then after about 2 years of being on the laptop, I decided to go convert over her desktop at work, and she's been on it. Like I said, it was whenever I think, what was it, Windows 7 went away or whatever, and then I had Windows 10 on there for on her other machine. But so yeah, it's January was her 4-year mark. So,
but don't you think that speaks volumes for the beauty of Linux, that if you just use it for basic day-to-day stuff, it works. It's only when you get down to really geeky people, like everybody here in the chat and everybody on the screen, when we try to do stupidly complicated things, that it becomes stupidly complicated. I know I could change my wife's laptop from Windows to Linux Mint, and she'd go, what have you changed the button for? But she'd still click the button. She'd still open up the, Mozilla Firefox. And she'd still open up Facebook. And it would just work because she doesn't do anything fancy. And that's the message that we can't get across. Do your basic stuff. There's absolutely nothing wrong with it. Start to do niche things. That's when you have to get geeky.
Yeah. The irony of that being, that for that, the vast majority of people who would benefit, because I honestly have always said this, I think they would benefit because the simple things they're doing rely on a consistent and dependable foundation. And unfortunately, Windows isn't always that, right? And I'm not going to knock it and say it always is a problem, but there can be problems, and problems that I don't see in Linux most of the time, especially for someone like using Mint that's just running their updates when they're supposed to run them, and the backups run, and everything's just happening for them, right? And then they just go on and use it the way they're supposed to use it. Like most people could use it that way, perfectly happy for the entire life of that machine. And it would be a wonderful experience. And that is a message that it's so hard because computers if they came with it, right? If they went to Best Buy and they didn't care and they just saw that it was $200 less because it didn't have that Windows license on it. And that's something else that Wimpy said, that he saved 165 quid on that Lenovo laptop because he didn't have to pay for the license. if that's they made that decision because it was available to them, imagine I don't think you would see that domination, but of course, the world being what it is, it's hard for them to, unless they have a geeky person like us or Joe or someone else that is willing to do that for them. They're never going to know.
I think the more you know, the more painful it is. I hate to say that.
Yeah,
But it really does. It's a love-hate relationship with technology, because I always want to set this up the way I want it, and then you get into it and you're digging in it and whatever, and then that's when you find a quirk. So you find something that's a little buggy or what, and it's more painful than if you just get on it and use it.
Yeah, and I'm exactly the same on Windows that I'm using predominantly now. If I just install Windows and leave it alone and use it, it works. But then I get that little tweak in the back of my head that goes, no, but on Linux I used to be able to do this, and I used to be able to do it, and then I try and do it, and I try and do it, and I get so far down this rabbit hole that I'm like, oh, sod it, I've got to redo the whole thing again. So off you go, and you go and reinstall. Install it, get it how you want, leave it, stop tweaking. And that's where the danger is, when you tweak and you don't really know what you're doing.
Well, I got smart with mine, Zeb. I don't know if we always talked about the Windows, and I've got my workstation up there for my accounting and all that. But then there were a couple of games, like what is it, Call of Duty, that's out and whatever. My sons, I wanted to play with them, and I was having so much trouble with Proton, and finally I said, you know what, I'll put it on that machine. But I really didn't want to mess with that machine. So when I built this one, I have 2 NVMe's in here. The fastest one has my Linux on it. It's a Western Digital. It's a 7,700 megabyte. Then I've got a 970 Evo in here that I had the other machine. That's got my Windows 10 on it, Pro. And then I've got 2 other drives. One's a data drive, and I split a 4 terabyte. They're all SSDs. So I have Windows storage on one side, Linux on the other. So if I want a game on Windows, I just reboot, go back into Windows, and I play. So I don't have to keep jumping between machines anymore. And it's the right tool for the job. So the reality of it is to have this argument about Windows sucks, Linux, you got to use what works for what you need it for. We've talked about that thousands of times already.
Well, and the thing is, Windows, as far as gaming goes, is still basically almost the right tool for the job. Even with how far Linux gaming has come, if you really want to run a lot of those multiplayer shooters, you're gonna have to use Windows, because they all have kernel level anti-cheat. And that just does not work in Proton at all. And that's why Call of Duty Warzone doesn't work, is because they use a kernel level anti-cheat. So that's never going to work.
Now, to that note, though, I do a lot of simulation games, Farming Sim, American Truck Simulator, those kind of things. Those are fantastic. They run, and then that mini motorways my grandson likes, there's, and I will tell you, some of them run better than they do on the Windows side too. Mm-hmm. But it depends on what you're doing. But you're absolutely right when you talk about the Windows-based, heavy hitter games.
Yeah,
I think you have to be on Windows.
Yeah, because the anti-cheats will get you almost every time these days.
There's some positives in that anti-cheat thing, and like a lot of that's getting worked on and has been improved, and there's some active work for that to make it easier to work in Linux, thanks to the Steam Deck and a lot of what Valve is doing. So I think that gap is closing. It's not there yet, but I think largely that gap is closed.
It 100%, and give Glorious Eggroll another couple of months, and he'll have that game working. What that guy has done with Nobara is just astonishing. Absolutely, no one's ever tried it, and you like gaming, Nobara Linux based on Fedora, again, another one of my old famous saying, it just works.
Glorious Eggroll's put out a Proton app to go into Proton natively in Garuda, I think, the way they have it set up. It's not a specific numbered one. It's almost like a generic. It's really amazing. I when I was having trouble with some of the games kicking off, I would switch to that, and they popped right up.
Yeah.
And they work.
I think what you're talking about is the Glorious Egg Rolls fork of Proton. Because he maintains a fork of Proton. And yeah, if I have any problems with any games, I switch to that and it works. Especially indie games. A lot of indie games, if you run that in the Glorious Egg Rolls, they're going to work 90% of the time. I love Glorious Egg Rolls work.
Yeah.
Well, cool. I wanted to ask a question. Okay, I'm going to get a little bit controversial here, so I apologize to the sensitive in the group, but did anybody miss snaps?
Not at all.
Not at all?
I did.
You did?
I'm
Okay.
going to shut up. I'm going to shut up.
Not even a little bit.
I don't know. Snaps, I use Flatpak, so I wouldn't have an issue anyway.
I missed Snap because Firefox takes forever to download through their repos. So I removed the package, the sources list thing that stops Snap, and I installed Firefox that way because it was taking like 15 minutes, 20 minutes to install Firefox.
Did you see that Firefox actually released a deb file? But there are some dependencies apparently, so it's not like it could be that you can't install it.
That deb file, I think, is just for Debian stable, so you can replace Firefox ESR with Firefox.
Swift is clapping. Is that right? No, never mind. he's doing something completely different.
No, but I think that's only for Debian stable because Debian stable sits with Firefox ESR.
Oh, okay.
I think they built that one for Debian stable. But to also fix that without snaps, you can go to the Mozilla site and download their tarball and extract it to your home folder and run Firefox from your home folder, and that automatically updates and rolls forward. So you don't need snaps to do that. Firefox, you can just.
I think I did that once, and there was something very specific about it. Just didn't integrate. There was some integration thing with the system that it was a little funky with running it as a tarball. So I just remembered that was. But I will say that installing Kubuntu the other day, the first thought I had was, oh great, Firefox is going to be a snap, and this is going to be annoying. And it really wasn't. I mean, they fixed all of the speed issues, all of that stuff. It just feels normal now. So I don't really see it as a problem. And actually, there was something else. It might have been Telegram desktop. So I run Flatpak for most of the software I use, just because it's easy to update. It's containerized. Like there's a lot of things I like about Flatpak. It's no secret. But right now, Telegram desktop on Flatpak has some weirdness with the pointer. The cursor is wrong, and it just...
It's back to front. Always has been for donkey's years.
Yeah, so... well, it had been working okay for me. Maybe on GNOME it works okay, but not on KD. I don't know. So anyway, I did install the snap of that just to do it. Just because I'm like...
Did that actually work, Eric? Because last time I tried it, it was broken.
No, the snap seems to work just fine.
There's also a PPA for Telegram as well.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I just, I don't necessarily dislike Snap. I think they put a lot of effort into it. I mean, obviously, some of their decisions are controversial with, none of the flavors can ship Flatpak by default, even though I just did that and it was really easy to install. But at the same time, I think that, there's no animosity I have towards Snap just because Canonical might be a little tone deaf with their audience. And I'd actually like to see it be successful. And I don't think that has to fail,
No. But going back to the cinnamon thing, though, what I've found I liked, because I think they've got a new software center now. And one of the things I always used to dislike having to do was you type in, let's say, Telegram, and then you get presented with 3 tiles. One of them was normal, one of them was a snap, and one of them was a Flatpak. The thing I noticed now when you go into the software center, it actually says package or Flatpak. And that enables you to make that decision do I want to the package? Because I've never liked flat packs from day one, because like I said, you do a minimum 10 megabyte install for a program and yet you just downloaded 2 gig of flat packs. It just seems for me crazy. But I like the fact that they now changed it so you can see package and flat pack. I thought that was a big plus.
Now coming back to what Eric said about requiring Ubuntu flavors to ship with snaps instead of flat packs, there is a reason why they're doing that, and it's because of Firefox and Chromium, because they only package those as snaps now. So if they're shipping it with Flatpak, not everything's going to integrate if you are shipping Ubuntu flavor.
I'll tell you, I would have put Mint on here today, except for there were some things that, I'm spoiled with the plasma, and I do have. I've been testing it on my test laptop here, where I have Mint loaded with the plasma desktop, and I could switch between them as I choose to. But I got a little spoiled with being on Manjaro for a long time, and then Garuda was, you loaded that up. It's kind of like what you were describing, Zeb, with Navarro, that, it's geared toward gaming. The downside to Garuda right out of the gate is it's bloatware. They got every stupid little app game loaded in there that I had to go in and take out and whatever, that kind of thing. It's a really nice system, but it's kind of, there's some things that I think are quirky about it. And I was having some issues with updating today and stuff. And I get to the point now I get frustrated, and I really don't want to be distro hopping, but I was struggling. Do I put regular vanilla Kubuntu on here, or do I put Studio? And I always liked Studio too. I like them both. But for the same reason that you were talking about here, I was really reluctant because of the snaps. And honestly, when I did load this on here, Firefox took forever to load initially, but then once it loaded, it's been fine.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
I never had a problem with snaps.
Yeah.
They just worked.
The other thing too that came to mind while you guys were talking here about this shipping with snaps and then pushing it, in one breath, it feels kind of like Windows proprietary kind of stuff. But the reality of it is there's been discussions over the years. How many times we said there's too many choices out there? There's too many Linux flavors. There's too many this, da. Well, here now, I look at this as maybe more so. I'm trying to be a little more objective in the fact that maybe they're just looking to have some more continuity and consistency, and that's how you, I think, eventually can maintain a system properly when you have this core base that's consistent across the board. And then it's not like you just said, Eric, too, which I did. I do like flat packs. I don't mind the space. I've got big enough drives or whatever. And I've only got 2.something% out of this 2 terabyte drive right now with everything I've loaded back on. But the point is I like the fact that I could do it. I could still put them on there if I wanted them. If they had locked that out, then I would have had a problem with it.
Yeah,
I would have too.
I think Elementary was going down that same road, right? So when you went to install a Flatpak, they would say, this is third-party software, we don't support it, there be dragons sort of thing. And I think for the same reasons that you kind of said, Joe, where they're trying to support their user base and not introduce the possibility of, people have said Flatpak is sort of inconsistent. When you have some people that are verified where you see the little blue check marks and it's the developer that, created the product or the software. And so you feel relatively comfortable that thing on Flatpak is good. And there are definitely times, like, I actually go and look. It's like I'm trained to use the AUR on Arch, where I don't just willy-nilly, install something with an AUR helper. I actually go and look at the AUR to see, like, is this thing being maintained? Or are there other people having problems? So I go to the Flatpak, FlatHub page, and if the packager is not the developer, it gives me pause, because I think, okay, this is a convenience factor, and that maybe someone is doing this to bring this software to Flatpak to make it easier for someone to use it, because the developer either hasn't gotten around to it or isn't interested in doing it. But I also think this person may not be taking into account all the things that need to happen to make this the best situation from a stability and security standpoint. And I think that makes a lot of sense. It's hard. You're in a position where you want to promote, like from Canonical's perspective, they put a lot of time and money and energy into Snap, into developing it and making it a better experience on desktop, only to have people be like, well, that's great, I'm just going to use Flatpak. So I think they really do want to have people at least think like, okay, Ubuntu is Snap centric, and at least sort of try it and use it. And when the way they're going about it, yeah, maybe that's not the best way to do it, but that's something they've done consistently. That just seems to be Canonical's curse, is that they get it wrong,
Sorry, I was going to say, I think the thing that Canonical got wrong when Snaps first came out is, well, thank you for downloading a Snaps, and we will update this when we want to, whether you want it updated or not. Now, I don't know enough about Flatpaks to say whether or not Flatpaks automatically updates, or you have to run the update yourself.
It's the opposite. By default, they don't auto update.
You can run it. You do. You can run them as you choose to. It shows up in your update list.
Yeah. Whereas Canonical, it was like, well, no, we've got a new version, so you're having it whether you want it or not. And that's
you
the thing
can
that
turn that off now.
But
that's, we're talking default.
Yeah.
It's
we're
default
talking default. I
behavior.
know.
Yeah.
I know.
Yeah.
But you can now turn it off, whereas the first versions of Snap you couldn't.
Yeah, and that's what a lot of system maintainers didn't like.
Yep. Very fair point. It's not an easy. Just listening to Joe describe his system, right, and all of the different permutations and drives and boots, this and the inherent complexity and difficulty in not only creating something that supports that, but then trying to help a user. Like I will go on Reddit every now and then, and Linux Mint, I follow Linux Mint on there, and today there were like 3 different posters on there just saying like, I did something, I don't know what, but it doesn't work anymore. And these are obviously people who are not skilled with Linux. They're not Joe or any of us here that manage our systems. They're just people trying it, and the inherent complexity of just something as solid and well put together as Mint, and somehow they've found a way down the wrong corner.
But you get people who like that on Windows as well.
Oh,
I
absolutely.
didn't think I needed those files, so I deleted them. And they've actually just deleted program files. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So you will always have those people who tinker, don't know what they've done, and then they get really angry when you can't fix it, but they can't tell you what they did wrong. Well, what did you do last? Oh, I don't know. I was just doing this. Well, what was this? I can't remember. Well, how am I supposed to fix it if you can't tell me? And they just don't get it. Yeah, they just don't.
It sounds like you're regretting retiring to me.
No, not at all. Not at all. 47 years of working. I've had enough. Thank you very much.
Congratulations. That's wonderful.
But
that you're taking it easy finally.
Yeah.
I hope.
Yeah.
But to your point, Eric, too, with these packages like the Flatpaks, I've been using them so long now that I go in and I know which ones I want to use. If there's one that I'm not familiar with, I'll do the same thing. I'll kind of vet it a little bit before I turn around and just drop it in the system. Now, one of the things I've noticed that Garuda did too was they had Octopi in there for package manager, and I put Discover in there because I wanted this something I was a little more used to. Granted, it didn't have all the availability that Octopi did with stuff, but Octopi also taps into the AUR, and it would just install stuff. Number one. Number two, even in Discover, when I would run update all, it didn't ask me for my password. It ran everything. And sure enough, I started having problems today, and I've only been on it probably 3 weeks. And I thought, that's it. That sign's already, like I said, I don't know what Manjaro did. I had a couple little hiccups through the 2.5 years or so I was on it. But then they ran one big update, and all of a sudden I lost my bootloader. And I thought, that's it. you know.
Yeah.
And yeah, you get spoiled with the latest and greatest, but even this right now, Ubuntu Studio, a lot of the flavors, the later ones now, that they have the 6.2 kernel in them. And
Yep.
I still think even this, I could see I still think there's probably a couple little bugs in this yet too, because it is still brand new or whatever, but
Right.
that's okay. I went into this knowing that. But like you said, if you're trying to bring somebody over from day one, from starting with this, now 2110, I would not, in Mint, I would not be afraid to put somebody on that. Otherwise, you do 20.3, you know, and they'll be happy as, you know, whatever analogy you want to use. But I do like some of the features that Mint added already, and I'm excited to see what else they come out with. I remember your thing, Zab, years ago, when you were talking about it earlier about your monitor setup. I remember how much you used to fight with having the multi-monitor or the dual monitors and the wide monitor in the center and the other one, and you couldn't get them to, you know, come over on this display properly or that one, or the resolutions were different or something. I remember you were always fighting with that.
Yep.
I assume that's gotten better.
No, what's gotten better was
Okay.
that I didn't realize that within NVIDIA settings, because I used to fight with R&R or LXR&R, where you used to have to talk about left of monitor DP 0 and give it all of the bits and pieces. Well, unbeknown to me, within the NVIDIA settings were two little sections where it talked about the spanning of the monitor.
Mm-hmm.
And the monitor I've got now, I can give it 2 DP feeds and it becomes two 27-inch monitors.
Yeah.
Well, and even Linux can do this. All I've got to do is tell it that the monitor on the left, which should be 2560 by 1440, I give it the 4K dimensions. The monitor on the right, I give it the 4K dimensions just by typing those numbers into the correct boxes. And bingo, I'm now running. So all of those years I wasted learning XR and R.
Well, that's what I meant.
All I had to do was fill in 2 boxes.
Right. You finally kind of got to a point where you understand.
But it was always there.
Yeah.
Oh, I understood it back in the day because I had to do it every single time I reinstalled something.
Yeah.
But the infuriation of thinking I could have been doing that 4 years ago, just typing in 2 dimensions and it works.
Yeah.
So yeah, Linux has always been, you've always been able to tame it. You've always been able to get it to work, but not without spending a couple of hours in a forum trying to remind yourself how it worked or what has changed because a developer thought this next bit would be good. Yeah, great for you, but it's just wrecked everything I ever did. So you have to go and relearn it all again.
Mhm.
And I'm just getting too old for that nonsense now. I just want to turn the machine on and use it. I've not got the patience anymore to go digging around, reminding myself what I learned 4 years ago. That's why I loved Nobara, because I just put it on, installed it, and went, blimey, it works.
So,
and an even bigger blimey, because Wayland worked.
Wolfnick, I think it's interesting. I don't know if your mic is working, but what you put in the chat here. So the reason you left Mint was because of an error Mint specifically had with the ASRock motherboards, which spammed the log file till you filled your hard drive. I'm really curious. I'm curious about what that error was. Says they fixed it, but not.
I would
for
be
your
too,
motherboard.
because I've got an ASRock in here. I have no problems with it on here.
Well, I think
he's out Mike today. Or he
Oh.
said earlier. I don't know if he can talk.
rats. Because that'd be interesting
Okay.
to hear more about for sure. But yeah, I think that
And it seems like it's a very specific motherboard as well.
it probably is. Whatever motherboard is that you have that caused problems. It wasn't for all of them. That's unfortunate. And I'd be interested in seeing like those log files, what they had in there many years ago. Yeah, maybe they fixed it already by now. But yeah, I'd be interested in those kind of like faults. I find them interesting because it's just, I don't know, they're just fascinating. Like I wonder what causes that, and I like to dig into those things. So I did have some other thoughts I wanted to give about Linux Mint. So one of the things that is an encumbrance to Linux Mint in general is the fact that it is an LTS, which is good for people who have older hardware and want to run the hardware longer, but it is a problem for newer hardware. And so they do have hardware enablement kernels that drop periodically. I don't know. I didn't read this and have time to actually dig into it, but Leo did send me this link about how you can do hardware enablement kernels for newer hardware on that. So I don't know if that would fix a lot of problems that some people have with newer machines, but that is something interesting, I think, that they are working on to mitigate the issue of being an LTS.
I don't know if I agree completely, though, Nate, with saying it doesn't work well with newer machines. Maybe the very latest cutting edge newer machines, but what categorizes an old machine? A 2019 machine like I had, or technically this is not quite a full generation behind now because I don't have to have the latest and greatest, but and I did have the issues with the Nvidia card when I was trying to put the latest Mint on it, the 2110, with all the different Ubuntu seemed to have that ghosting, and that no matter what I did with the Xorg, .conf, what is it, .d or whatever file I used to put in there, it didn't work until I went back to an Arch base. But this one with the AMD card in here and stuff, the only thing I had to do was go in there and tell it I've got a 144 hertz monitor because there was slightly tearing. It was at 60. I put it at 144, boom, and it's fine.
But isn't
that
the
Nvidia
sort of
settings? Sorry.
No, goes up. Go ahead.
I was just going to give Joe a quick tip with that Nvidia settings thing that you are talking about cause you problems, because that's something I've never had a problem with any of my Nvidia cards, that they blip like that. And it was actually Rocco who taught me the one simple trick that you have to do when you go into OpenGL settings.
Right.
Yeah, turn off allow flipping.
Allow flipping, yes. Right.
Yeah, you turn that off, and for me, everything went away.
It did on the older versions, but I noticed on the newer version, the 2110 or the newer versions of Mint, it got quirky.
It works fine for me now.
Yeah,
and I've got 1, 2, 3, 4 monitors connected to this.
Yeah.
And
So it might very well just be hardware specifics, things like that.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Which, like we said before, when Eric was talking about the laptops, there are so many different permutations. It might be your particular graphics card with your Intel chipset, along with your something or other, and the motherboard that just doesn't like it. It's weird.
So I want to respond to Joe on the newness of the hardware. So specifically what I mean is like within the time between the release of the hardware and when and the release that the LTS or that particular kernel. So
Gotcha.
many a times like you have like on the LTS versions, you can have like a 6 or 9 month lag on anything that comes out. I know there's a pretty big issue with like AMD stuff because they do push a lot of things into the kernel, and so a lot of those newer chipsets are not going to be available to be used on an LTS. So you have to have that hardware enablement in order to use those newer chipsets. That's
also true, Nate, of Windows too. Like with these 40 cards and stuff like that, there's a lot of stuff that they're playing catch up on with those too.
Sure, that happens. But Windows Windows gets the first class treatment though before Linux, so that's the other issue. So you'll get it within a few weeks with Windows, but it'll be, unless if you're on a rolling release, you're not going to get it, basically for 6 months or so on Linux, generally speaking.
Yeah.
Well, I raised the question only because for years, and the way it was said was that, oh, hey, you got an old machine laying around and you want to get it up and running, just put Linux on it. And that's the way I kind of took that, because I thought Linux isn't the way it used to be, that it's only for old machines. You know what I mean? It does work very well on some newer stuff. It may not, like you said, it may not be right out there with the first cutting edge thing out there, and I'm fine with that. But if we're talking something that's got to be older hardware, I don't agree with. So I guess it was just I wanted to make sure that we were clear on what we're talking about.
I think Leo hits it perfectly. Says your hardware is old when the Ubuntu LTS supports it with the original shipped kernel. That's when your hardware is old.
Well,
yeah,
and that's the thing about LTS is, yes, it's going to have the older kernels, which is why I always suggest if your hardware is newer than a year and a half, then you should not use an LTS version of Ubuntu, because it's just the chances are it's not going to support that hardware. You'll be much better off with Arch or OpenSUSE, because you're going to have the newest kernels and you're going to have the newest drivers with those particular releases.
Well,
that
it also depends on when. So it's
Yeah.
not a hard fast rule, but like when the hardware is released in relation to the LTS kernel. So if you're reaching like toward the end of the LTSs, between LTS, you know, that 2 year, if it's like a year and a half into the LTS, yeah, you may not get it there. But if it's like, you know, within 6 months, chances are they've pulled all the latest hardware stuff, all the hardware enablement into it. So but
because they do backport the kernels, but yeah, it just takes a while.
And Nate, you know that link you put into the latest Edge ISO?
Yes.
And it talks about the 20.3 Edge is a 5.13 Linux kernel. If you go into the Mint update tool and click on View Kernels, you can actually install right now 5.19.
Oh, nice.
Which is higher than the Edge one.
I think this is the documentation here is a little bit behind because there is newer stuff here. It's just not been updated. So, you know, if you are a fan of Linux Mint and you want to help out with their documentation, actually I'm sure they'd appreciate it.
Yeah, but I'm assuming then you can just go to the Linux Mint download page and find the latest ISO for Edge, which I might do tomorrow because my game's not working. I want to see if it works on the next version.
It hasn't been released yet for the newest version of Mint. There is no version for the newest Mint.
Okay.
There is also another option with Mint. It's the Liquix kernel as well. I can put a link to the chat in that, but it generally runs pretty bleeding edge to the Linux kernel.
Yeah.
So.
But like I said earlier, 5 years ago I'd have jumped all over that, but I just can't be bothered now. I just want to install it, run it. Does it work? No, let's find one that does. And there are a number of them out there that still do work. But if I can just be really, really cheeky, I'd like to ask Swift a question, because I noticed when I watched the podcast last week that he's still on Solus. How have the updates been coming down? How have they been working for you? Has it been good?
Yeah, once I turned around to CDM and I ran that, the updates have been just fine. You know,
brilliant, because I thought it was amazing that you'd stuck through it for, what was it, like 2 years when no one was there, no one was maintaining it. It was all going pear-shaped and people were coming and people were going and then here you are gloriously using it every day, waiting for the knight in shining armor to come back, and Ike's come back with Josh, and it's great.
That's the thing. I didn't know until very recently what was going to happen. I just had a positive. I mean, a lot of it, to be honest, was the fact that I hate changing the distro. I'm happy with my current setup. So I was already kind of frustrated. It's like, oh my goodness, why y'all doing this? Why are you guys, whatever's going on with the team, y'all need to get this stuff together. You need, what's going on with Data Drake? Like, come on, the story wasn't making sense. Everything, it was just getting dumb. And then I go on Reddit, and people, you know how people are on Reddit. I don't even like it. And so that was annoying.
Extremely nice.
Huh?
Reddit's like a place where just nothing but the nicest, kindest, least toxic people are on Reddit, right?
They're the most awesome
Is today opposite day?
ever. Oh my goodness, you just want to hug all of them.
Right? Oh yeah, just
hug them or crush them.
Well, whichever.
Oh goodness.
So I love Solus. I've been running it on at least one of my computers since 2016. That's how much I love this project. I like something that's unique. For goodness sake, we're not on the backs of Ubuntu. We're not on the backs of Arch. It's something different.
Yep.
And I get tired of people complaining, oh my goodness, the repos. Shut up. You got Flatpak. You have Snap. You can ask for what they're going to have some esoteric, some little program. Why you use this program? Then Solus isn't for you. Be quiet. It's okay if it's not for you. Be quiet. Use Ubuntu. Use Fedora. Use Nabara. Whatever distro is going to have those packages that you somehow need for your everyday life, then use that. Yeah. Be quiet.
Yeah. The only problem I ever had with Solus is it was a real pain to try and get it to work alongside other distros when you were distro hopping all the time, because Solus wants complete control of that disk. Yeah.
They use system deboot.
You can't. It's very difficult without going into your system BIOS. Getting Solus added to a grub is virtually impossible. So in the end, I gave up. I gave it its own disk, and whenever I wanted to go to Solus, I pressed F8 and picked the Solus disk. And if I wanted to go to Ubuntu, I pressed F8. And so you're picking the EFI menu. I don't know what was it you called it, Eric? System
deboot. Yeah.
System deboot. Yeah.
So a little
I found a way around it.
That's what they actually tell you to do. They say if you want a dual boot, fine, hit F8 and pick the other one.
So a little clarification about when I got started with Solus, because I had it on my T420. I had the hard drive. I swapped out the optical drive for another drive, and then I used the mSATA drive and the whatever thing that is in the bottom. I forgot what it's called. I might have said it right. I don't know. Anyway, I put it on that tiny little 64 gig drive, which was a mistake because it wasn't big enough for what I really wanted to do. That's my only thing. I just didn't think I was going to like it. And so I like it, and then I'm like, oh, I love this. But I had Windows 7 on one of the drives. I had some creation I did with Ubuntu Mate on the other drive. That was just storage because that didn't load up properly because I managed to mess that up. Congratulations, genius. And then I had the Solus installation. And so I guess because they were on separate drives, I never ran into that issue. And that was the last time I ever even had where I tried to do different distributions on a laptop. So, everybody's got their own system.
I'm personally glad that you've stuck with it and you're happy with your decision, because that's really what really matters. And and I had to look up the idiom going pear-shaped, and so apparently it's a British idiom for those that don't know. And I laughed super hard at the origins of it. And this is just totally an aside. So it came from the RAF, the Royal Air Force, as a humorously exaggerated allusion to the shape of an aircraft that has crashed nose first. And I thought that was extremely funny for some reason, and so I just had to share that. So, all pear-shaped.
I'll admit, I like Solus. I actually tried it on this laptop right here, and I didn't think I was going to like it because of the small repos, but I had Snap-on to it, and I love it.
Say small repos one more time.
Come on. Small repos.
So
there's a lot of those weird sayings I can throw your way, Nate, and make you laugh again. Mate.
I know. I love British idioms. They are the best.
I'm reading something that's ever so slightly different. It was about them doing loops, that instead of being round, they were pear-shaped. So not actually crashing, but still to do with the RAF.
Yeah.
So anyway, who knows?
Well, regardless, I think there's a lot there are a lot of British idioms that I've looked at in the past that made me laugh really hard, and I think that I think they're precious. Actually, I think British idioms are precious because they're so funny.
Can I share one really quickly?
Sure. Yeah, why not?
So there's this guy that when he takes off his glasses, he says he's taking off his lads and lasses. It's one of those Cockney things that they do where they replace of an action or a word with something like that. And I don't know why, but the first time I heard him say it, it just blew my mind, and I laughed for like a solid minute. I was like, your lads and lasses? Anyway, yeah. So I absolutely adore all of that.
Yeah.
I can't get enough. So sorry, I had to say that.
Nope, that's great. I'm getting notifications that my internet connection is becoming unstable, so I don't want to have another issue. So I just want to wrap up here since we're at time anyway. Does anybody else have anything else on Linux Mint they would like to throw out there?
I do, but only if my microphone's working.
And it's working.
It works.
Hey, right under the wire. There's just something I wanted to bring up that Linux Mint does that's really special. And when I was new to Linux, I used this and it made all the difference. You get a welcome screen, and I actually found that really useful. And I didn't turn that off for a long time. But also, if you click on help on that welcome screen, there's a button to open up an IRC chat room. And so if you click it, it opens up Hexchat. So, it doesn't even matter if you don't know what IRC is or you don't know Hexchat is actually an IRC client. It just opens it up, puts you straight into the room. And that's something I don't know of any other distribution doing. And it's like absolutely amazing for a new user. I mean, it's like, it makes all the difference. But I did run into one issue, and I did post it on the Telegram. I wasn't able to get a confirmation if someone else ran into it. So, please tell me if you did. But when I followed that, when I clicked on help and then launched IRC, opened up Hexchat, brought me to the room, and then it says, cannot join Linux Mint help, you are banned. So I think it might have been because I was using a VPN. I'm not sure. Dropped the VPN, went back in, same flow, still banned. But I did, I know how to use Hexchat, so I loaded the rooms and I was able to get into their regular room. I forget the name of it. It's like Linux Mint General or something like that. Linux Mint Chat. And I was able to get into that one, which is good, but I'm not sure. Like a new user might struggle if they're new to Linux or new to IRC. But yeah, that's something unique to Mint that I just think is awesome, and I wish more people would do.
I think everybody does a welcome screen, but a lot of them I find to be fairly ineffective. They really they'll show a feature, they'll do something that they think is helpful, but the thing I love about Mint and always have is it literally takes you step by step. Okay, you're gonna want to set up, backups. You're gonna want to update your system. You're gonna want to install some software. You're gonna want to, and it's such a logical, well thought out approach that I've always, whoever came up with that, they really were thinking that day. So sorry, Zeb, I didn't mean to cut you off.
No, it's all right. I was just going to let Ulfric know that I've just clicked that hex chat and it went straight in for me. So it was just a weird thing with your VPN.
Yeah, it was probably my VPN.
So
yeah, I appreciate that. Thanks.
When you talked about getting on Linux Mint and going right to Hexchat, I'll never forget when I started using it that I found that chat IRC. They were very, very helpful, and shout out to Muffin, whoever that person was, because that person walked me through how to use IRC for the first time. I got more comfortable because I had no idea what I was doing. I just clicked on something because it looked like a program I never used before. And that person really helped me to get things situated. And next thing you know, 10 years later, I'm still using Hexchat, rarely. But I'm on IRC at the very least. So it's just amazing how having a good experience can really make the biggest difference in use of Linux or use of any other programs. It's all in the people that you come across. I'm still in that IRC group channel to this day.
Oh, awesome.
That
was also the first time I ever talked to the quote unquote Linux community. That was my first experience, and being able to find it so easily, it was just awesome. Like I was fresh off Windows, I didn't know any better, and there I was talking to real awesome people who loved Linux and were just taking their time out of their day to help people like me, and it was just so cool. So yeah, it's good stuff. Well done, Linux Mint.
It was the same experience with me because I was using Google to try to figure out problems. Like one of my first issues when I started Linux was I didn't have audio because we didn't have codecs back then. And that was a pain. It took me forever. I'm embarrassed to say how long it took me to resolve that issue. But my goodness, when you come across a community that's helpful and they don't make you feel bad for being new, because sometimes you ask a question, you don't know what to ask. You don't know what's going on. And people just assume that you're just trying to be annoying, but you're not. You just don't know. And so you kind of need somebody to kind of walk you through, okay, well, what are you trying to do? And ask the right questions and draw you out. And then before you know it, you're comfortable, and then you're in a position where you can assist others. But if you
Yeah.
clam people up and read this and do this and do that and jump down people's throat, that's just not a good look.
The one thing that I'll
Yeah.
comment about Linux Mint, if I may, is if you remember right, dating myself again, when I was on Mint for 2 years and decided to get off it, it was over something very foolish that they did. It was that this was just following when they did the mistake with that ISO that they put a weak password and they got hacked on their website. It wasn't too long after that. I was having issues with my with a lot of the little applets. Nothing was loading, whatever, and I thought, God, would something break? And I'd reinstall, and then I reinstall, and it just wasn't working. Only to find out that after I finally hopped, that's when I went to Manjaro, that they were redoing their Spices website server, and never put out a simple notification that, hey, the Spices, may or may not work. We're in the process of updating. It's something simple like that. But I thought something broke in the distro itself. And to me, that was one of the second dumbest things that they ever did. So it seems like they've gotten better that way with things too. But that's something I'm pointing it out because that's something to keep in mind. Never assume it's what you think it may be. It just, I don't even know how I stumbled upon that to figure it out, that it was the Spices, that their web server their whole site and everything was being redone. Because I've never had a problem since, and they work fantastic now in Mint, everything that I've put in there. Right down to the weather app. There aren't too many weather apps that are real accurate. And even their weather app is really accurate.
Yeah.
Well, I think that about does it. So thank you all for your input on Linux Mint. I think that it's been great. So next week, we are going to have our news flight night. So if you have any news topics, please send them to suggestions@linuxsaloon.com or one of the many chat apps that we're a part of. Also, there is a Linux Saloon calendar. So if you go to linuxsaloon.com or cubiclenight.com/Linux Saloon, you can get to the Linux Saloon calendar. You can see what's coming up next. And I try and keep that updated at least a couple weeks out just to make sure. And, keep yourself updated as to whether or not the times shift a little bit in case of like work issues or whatnot. So linuxsaloon.com for that. Also, if you have any distribution suggestions or application suggestions, so in a couple weeks we're going to do an application appetizer. So I think we'll probably try and do maybe I'll talk to Eris about if we can do maybe a straw poll on some application ideas, or at least like genres of applications maybe. We can do that, whatever. We'll figure something out there, but we'll try to narrow down a couple of application ideas, or at least genres of applications, and see what people might be interested in. So if you have any suggestions for applications, be sure to send those to suggestions@linuxsaloon.com or any place else. All right, so it is closing time, and I want to thank you all for being here. So I want to just kind of go down here. So Eric, you are now part of Distrohoppers Digest, right? So distrohoppersdigest.blogspot.com, I believe, is the website for that. So you can listen to you on a monthly podcast now. So I think you can be a regular member there.
Yes.
All right. And if you had anything else you want to plug on that was my lead-in.
My first episode just came out. You covered everything in the lead-in, so you didn't leave me anything. No, the first episode just came out with me on it, episode 42, this week, and it's Mossdale and myself, and just always been a fan of that show. It's very detail-oriented, usually with the reviews, and it's on hardware, which is nice, and I'm really enjoying being part of that again. I was nervous to do the taping and all that, but it went really well. They're good guys, and I'm looking forward to sticking with it. So.
Oh, so you said episode 42. So isn't 42 like the answer to everything?
We missed a trick on that one. Yeah, we realized after the fact it was like, we should have been. It was the show to answer all questions.
Yeah.
The answer, so, that we missed our opportunity. So
that's all right. Well. You can try and like rehash it for the next episode or something. Maybe. Well, excellent. So distrohoppersdigest.blogspot.com for more information on that. Steve, I want to apologize, Steve. I have to apologize to you. I had something come up Sunday morning, and I entirely missed the live show. And I'm sure you didn't even notice or care, but I felt bad not being there.
Held back the tears.
Did you hold back? I'm sorry. But so tomorrow, are you going to be live on air or on YouTube, whatever, tomorrow?
That's the plan.
Any subject, more OBS nerding out, or
maybe a little bit of Linux Mint, maybe a little bit of OBS. Something came up that stirred some childhood nostalgia.
Oh, that's exciting.
That I want to talk about, and yeah.
Well, great.
Good old hoop stick.
Oh, so Steve's gonna bring out his hoop stick from. He probably found it at the Goodwill. That was from like 1938 or whatever. That'll be great. I look forward to that.
Did he just say 1938? Oh my God. You just put 30 years on this man's age, or 20-something years.
Let's just say Steve has a very different definition of Nickelodeon than the rest of us.
Hey.
Nothing but love, Steve. Nothing but love.
I feel it.
I'm just saying it was a vintage 1938 that he found. I'm not saying that it was. He's from 1938.
Channel into Grandpa Steve's very own.
Old man Steve.
Soon enough.
Soon to be retired, Steve. I'm assuming.
I'm hoping.
Well, whenever, I suppose. So excellent. Tomorrow, 8 a.m. Central or 9 a.m. Eastern, if you live in in civilized time zone. Mark, you have an awesome group that you are a part of. What is that group called?
Well, the Atlanta Linux Enthusiasts. We meet every Sunday from 3 to 6 p.m. U.S. Eastern Time, and everyone's welcome to join. There's no set agenda. It's just a group of folks that try to help you out with your Linux problems. You do kind of need to manage your problem and make sure you get the help that you need. Sometimes we go off topic, but then we try to get back on topic pretty quick. Again, you can find out more at l.org. We're also on Meetup. And again, it's every Sunday. So, if you don't have a question this Sunday or can't make it, check us out another time. And it's just a good time to, learn some Linux.
Excellent. It is a great group of guys. So, check it out.
I just want to mention.
I just wanted to second that. I took Swift's recommendation last time and checked it out myself, and the guys there they're lovely, and there are people getting help. So yeah, it's awesome. Recommend it.
Yeah, when Swift was talking, well, actually both of you were talking about people taking time to help. In my mind, I'm thinking, yeah, that's ale.org. Like that's exactly what they do for 3 hours every week. Like anyone's welcome to come and get free tech support, which is just awesome.
Yeah, it's super cool. And I think it's a great service. Being technology enthusiasts, helping other people who are, with their technology, I think is important. And, it makes the technology more accessible. So I think it's awesome that you do that.
Yeah.
You should be on Linux Mint's welcome page.
Yeah, you should be. Yeah.
Yeah, Hexchat and mail.org.
Rick, you say you're not a Linux guru guy, but I don't know that's. You seem like kind of a guru to me now.
Sort of one, halfway.
Maybe better than half. Let's say at least 51%.
All right, that'll work. Yeah. I got 2 shows coming up. I got one been working on Endless OS distro, and finished editing it, but I got to add a few things into it still. And before I push it out, and then I got also the Saturday. Coming Saturday at 10 o'clock. I've got a prophetic that I'm interviewing, so be sure to tune in for that.
Right.
Cool.
Well, excellent. I think it's great that you're having Prophetic on because I think Prophetic is a really, really cool dude.
Yeah. He's helped me out quite a few times, actually, I think. So,
If you haven't checked out Linux User Space, I'm not sure what your problem is, but Dan and Leo, they put on a great show. I think so. The last one they put out was episode 3, season 3, episode 19. You Got Moxie Kid. I'm not sure if that's the last one for the season, because I thought they did 20 episodes, but I could be wrong. Anyway, check out linuxuserspace.show. It's a great episode, and actually that episode really changed my mind about the Ubuntu stance on snaps and Flatpak a little bit. Not completely, but I think I have more understanding, more compassion for the direction that Ubuntu went and why they're going there, for quality control and so forth. And, brand consistency. But anyway, I think it's a great show. Check out Linux User Space at linuxuserspace.show. Great podcast. So they should take fewer breaks. And by fewer breaks, I mean none. But I understand why they do it.
Yeah.
I'm on a podcast called Linux Out Loud. I have 2 co-hosts. One of them is wonderful, Wendy, and the other one is there. That's Matt. Actually, I'm editing the show now. I'm going to try and get it done ahead of time. I can't even remember what we just talked about. This is really sad. But anyway, it was a great conversation. Wendy came back from World, so her robotics conference that she did. She was gone the last couple weeks, essentially, for almost 2 weeks. So check that out. Oh yeah, we talk about alternative career paths in tech is what we actually talked about. So that's what it was. Linux Out Loud. So I have a website called cubiclate.com. I do things there, so you can check that out if you feel like it. Linux Saloon is part of the Tux Digital Network, so you can check out more great shows at tuxdigital.com, like Destination Linux, GameSphere, or This Week in Linux. I want to thank you all for your support, however you do it, being a part of this conversation, both on the on the Zoom meeting and the YouTube stream, as well as everyone for watching the show after the fact, especially when we have stream issues and things just kind of shut down on me. So thank you so much, truly, for watching and so forth. I want to thank everyone involved in making the Linux and open source tools possible for us to not only have this conversation, but also to have fun and enjoy technology. Linux truly puts personal back into personal computers. Thank you for stopping by. Be sure to tip your developers, and please remember to Linux responsibly. Until next time, see yas.
Bye.
Bye.
Anything that is Linux, tech, and open source related is
Let's see here. Wait a second.
You
Is
got
that
it.
me?
Yes, you got
Yeah,
it.
right.
Excellent.
Yeah, you got to crank the volume up so loud. I didn't think it would go this loud.
And you're totally overmodulated, but you know what? If it means that your mic actually works, we'll go with it.
No, you just have to crank it up really loud.
And I'm going to use that for the bloopers. So,
Isn't that
talk what's up. Do our community free pour. Actually, no, we're not going to do community free pour because I don't have anything.
So.
Yeah, I kind of think the BTRFS snapshot is a nice in-between. It's nice. So there's some
when
positives.
it comes to like indie games.
I lost the stream. Hang on.
Yeah. Oh, okay.
Yeah, so I did a refresh and it came back, and then just before you said it, it went off again, Nate.
Okay.
Yeah,
Is the stream back?
Nope,
No.
it's not. I'm having some YouTube connection errors. Can I access a specified channel on stream key? Please double check your stream key if it's correct. There may be a problem connecting to the server.
Yeah, I never had a problem with snaps. It's weird.
What's that?
Oh, this is why people don't like streaming on YouTube anymore. Everybody, as they want to use Twitch.
Never underestimate YouTube's power to screw everything up.
Well,
yeah,
I thought a lot of YouTube, Twitch people are coming over to YouTube.
A lot of Twitch people are coming to YouTube now.
Yeah.
Okay, make up your mind, folks. I don't know. I hear.
Well, I think
revenue
because
split is
Twitch
much
does
better.
720 and YouTube does 1080 or
1080,
4K.
yeah.
Okay.
And not only that, but Twitch takes 50% of all your revenue.
Mm-hmm.
If you get somebody subscribed to your channel for $3.99, Twitch will take 50%.
Yeah.
All right, let's see if I can get this thing back going again.
Okay.
It's good hearing you again, Zeb.
Yes.
Yeah, it's been
it
fun.
is good
It's been
hearing.
fun back. It's been fun coming back.
Do, 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 do.
The stream was dead all this last part, right?
Well, I put it back up, but that stream, I had to put on a different
Oh, okay.
different
URL,
whatever,
yeah.
different URL.
Yeah.
So the thing died. It wouldn't come back up. I couldn't reconnect, and so I had to do some manual things. It was just it wouldn't let me reconnect.
But you'll edit
Yeah.
it and put it out as a full video.
Yeah. All that like garbage in the middle, I'll put it as part of the bloopers. That's actually my
Yeah.
my